Today we announce charges against Ghislaine Maxwell for helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually exploit and abuse multiple minor girls from the period of 1994 through 1997. Maxwell was among Epstein's closest associates and helped him exploit girls who were as young as 14 years old. Maxwell played a critical role in helping Epstein to identify, befriend, and groom minor victims for abuse. In some cases, Maxwell participated in the abuse herself.
That was the moment in July of last year when the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York announced that the FBI had arrested British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell. She's back in the news today because her attorneys are using the recent court decision that let Bill Cosby out of prison as an argument for tossing out Maxwell's sex trafficking case. So let's break down what is in the recent court filing. Maxwell's attorneys are petitioning the court, saying that the late Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend's situation is similar to Bill Cosby's situation. And the issue that they're pointing to is that both cases were covered under non-prosecution agreements at the time that they were charged in their respective sex abuse cases. In Cosby's case, his attorneys addressed the recent decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and explained how any outrage on his convictions for aggravated indecent assault being overturned should not be directed at Mr. Cosby, but directed at the DA who made the deal with him at the time. Let's take a listen.
A lot of this energy, this angry energy, should really be directed at the prosecutors, because this is a case about prosecutorial misconduct. You may take issue with Mr. Castor for having made the agreement in the first place, and you should also take issue with the prosecutors who refused to honor that agreement. So that is what the story is here. All of the alleged victims had every opportunity to press their claims at the time that the statute of limitations allowed them to do so. For various reasons, they chose not to, and I'm not here to judge why they may have chosen not to. But we still have a system of laws and rules and a constitution that requires us to play by the rules. And you can't cheat to get a conviction just because we now have a movement that wants to make a platform inside the courtroom for women who chose not to press their claims or didn't press their claims for some reason or another. That's fine on social media, that's fine in the newspapers, but in the courtroom, we have to still follow the rules, and we can't make it a platform just about women coming forward who didn't at the time when it would have been possible to prosecute those claims.
Now, Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers contend that the same principle that freed Cosby ought to apply to their client's case, because they say she was covered by a non-prosecution agreement with Jeffrey Epstein that was signed with federal prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida years ago. But is she covered by it? Let me bring in our legal analyst guest to discuss with me, criminal defense attorney Josh Schiffer. And Josh, you have a lot more knowledge about this case than most attorneys do, because you also represent one of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers. So our viewers ought to know that as well. So I wanted you in particular to be here with me today to discuss this. First of all, let's talk about the fact that these are two different jurisdictions here. The Southern District of New York and the Southern District of Florida. Your thoughts on that first, please.
Well, it's a complicated issue because from first glance, they both involve non-prosecution agreements, and they both involve the state giving permission for people to kind of go about the rest of their life. There are huge differences, however, that really are going to put Ms. Maxwell's position in contravention to what Mr. Cosby's lawyers were able to claim. In the Cosby matter, the district attorney specifically made oral agreements and representations with Mr. Cosby's legal team that they would not prosecute him, and only because of that, and Mr. Cosby detrimentally relied on the district attorney's decision, only then would Mr. Cosby participate in a concurrent civil suit where he offered up lots of statements that would otherwise be covered by his Fifth Amendment, and he never would have made them. And that allowed that civil suit to move forward and produced a result that was substantial financially. Unlike the Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein matter. In the Jeffrey Epstein matter, when U.S. Attorney Acosta was prosecuting him, there was a written, very explicit federal non-prosecution agreement that does cover co-conspirators, but those co-conspirators aren't named. It's not like there's a big old list of these are the people that were involved in my underage grooming prostitution gig. And her name's not on any of it, even though she was certainly known to investigators at the time. There's another big issue in that Miss Maxwell never detrimentally relied on that non-prosecution agreement and in order to then waive other constitutional rights. She doesn't get to claim the costs against her of participating in another lawsuit that she otherwise wouldn't have absent the non-prosecution agreement. So I think she's reaching really hard. I give him an A+ for effort and creativity. But yeah, this is not going to be, in my opinion, a successful argument. I don't think she can get into Mr. Cosby's same position when it comes to the court system. She can't prove the detrimental alliance in an agreement that she wasn't even party to. She didn't have privity. And Julie, I know you know the Cosby case from being up in that neck of the woods. The prosecution that made this agreement with Mr. Cosby all those years ago, he is getting drugged through the mud left, right, and center because it was that affirmative action that's preventing Mr. Cosby from serving the time that a lot of people think he deserves.
Josh, couple follow-ups for you, please. So, number one, I have two things with me here that I brought to the anchor desk today. The letter that Ghislaine's lawyers wrote to the judge on Friday. And one of their arguments, and I'm with you, I think their argument fails. Like you said, great attempt, but I think at the end of the day, it's a big stretch. They said that her case is even stronger than Cosby's because the agreement was memorialized in writing, and I've got that too. It's 7 pages long. But to your point, she's not named in it. So that's my other question. So not only different jurisdictions, we're talking about the Southern District of Florida, where Alexander Acosta made this, in my view, terrible agreement to cover Jeffrey Epstein. And then we're talking about the Southern District of New York, who's now going after Ghislaine. And in this, on page number 5, and I'm reading verbatim, it says, the United States also agrees it will not institute any criminal charges against any potential co-conspirators of Epstein, including but not limited to Sarah Kellen, Adriana Ross, Leslie Groff, or Nadia Marcinkova. As you pointed out, Josh, doesn't mention Ghislaine Maxwell. Her name is not mentioned. So they're relying on that language that says any potential co-conspirators, including but not limited to the 4 names we mentioned here. So her attorneys are saying, well, she's there. She's covered by this. So different district, not named. Also, she's not the defendant, the party to it, like you pointed out, like Cosby was and Epstein is in this case. Thoughts on that, please, Josh?
She doesn't have privity with the agreement. She's not a party to the agreement. Those names that you list off, one of which is a client of my firm from when we worked on the Epstein issue down in our office in the Virgin Islands on the probate portion, fighting the protective issues that the estate had created to prevent justice from going through. Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't part of anything AUSA Acosta put forth in writing. Federal practice, as you know and the viewers should know, federal practice is more document-driven than any state practice in criminal law. The feds put everything in writing to make sure it's extra clear. If Ghislaine Maxwell was going to be a known beneficiary or intended beneficiary of this non-prosecution agreement, she would have been listed. Odds are Mr. Epstein and his team decided to not include Miss Maxwell in the allegations because they were trying to keep her away from it. Remember, this non-prosecution agreement resulted in some negative consequences for Mr. Epstein, not nearly as many as I feel he believed and what everybody else feels he believes. And now, remember, we've gone back and looked at this agreement, and basically everyone's decided it was terrible. It was an abuse and a betrayal of our system. There's been a lot of litigation over how the federal government did all these victims wrong in allowing Mr. Epstein to escape an effective prosecution. And there's some really sordid allegations in there. I don't feel she has a very good shot, but anything she can do to slow down her prosecution, she's going to do.
You're right, Josh. She's got a great team of lawyers. They are trying. And still she is in jail, awaiting trial set to happen in the fall. We're going to keep our eyes on it. Josh Schiffer, thank you so much for weighing in on this big case.